All right, we're live. Just in the nick of time, Steven. Just in the nick of time. I was going to try to do like a question kind of section while we were waiting on you to join the live. I know you got a little bit more stuff to do besides me.
Got out of church a
So
little bit later today.
yeah. So, but we're back for another live episode of Two Guys Talking Sports, recapping Week 6 of college football. Um, before we jump into it, this really turned out to be quite a Saturday of college football. There weren't many games on paper people were excited about heading into yesterday. But Stephen, my God, it turned into a wild Saturday. Excluding the Carolina Clemson game, and we'll get into more of the college stuff here towards the end of the show. But I mean, you have Alabama coming off a wild victory over Georgia, then lose to Vanderbilt in Vanderbilt. You got Tennessee going into Arkansas, losing Fayetteville. Miami comes down. I believe they were down 35-10 at one point, came back and win in the final seconds. Michigan falls to in Washington. They kind of continued their season of struggles. USC loses on the road to Minnesota. I think they're still struggling to life of Big Ten football. And surprise to me, the biggest surprise was Missouri losing to Texas A&M the way they did. Missouri hadn't had the season so far the way they did last year,
Right.
but that to lose the way they did, and like so, we'll get into more of it towards the end of the show. But man, that really surprised me. What'd you think of the slate yesterday?
But any given Saturday, and it kind of when you see those results for some of these teams that you don't expect it from, it kind of in some way makes you feel a little bit better whenever you take a tough loss because, like I said, any given Saturday you can come out and just get blown out, or you could be a team that just blow somebody else out. You just never know in college football. It's sometimes it's very hard to predict what's going to happen.
And the life of being a Gamecock fan, you never know what team's going to show up for the Gamecocks each weekend. And so we'll get right into the Carolina Ole Miss game. South Carolina, I feel we had some momentum coming into Saturday or to yesterday against Ole Miss. Coming off a bye week, big victory against Akron. It seemed that South Carolina did find some success on the offensive side of the ball. The defense is always going to be what the defense is, in my opinion. I think that's the strongest part of the Gamecocks. But really, this was such a huge, huge disappointing loss yesterday. We watched it together. I don't think I've ever been more deflated as a Gamecock. In the Shane Beamer era. I mean, there's a lot to, kind of be down about in the Muschamp era and the way Spurrier's tenure ended. But before I get going, I'll let you give your thoughts on the game, kind of what you thought about it.
Just what you said. Just it's deflating. It seemed like you had a lot of momentum. Obviously, you didn't win the LSU game, but you felt a lot better about the team coming out of that. And then you finally had a game against Akron where you're obviously playing an opponent that's not really up to your competition level, you would say, and you blow them out like you're supposed to, and then you get a bye week going in to get healthy, to really prepare for an Ole Miss team who the previous week they didn't look good. They finally played some competition in Kentucky, lost that game, so you felt even more confident about the Gamecocks, and then they come out and just do nothing. I say that they didn't come out and do nothing. They came out strong on defense. You get a 3 and out, you make them punt, and then you get the ball, don't really do much, and then I think that the critical key play, and it happened within the first 2 series, was that fake punt, and that really set the tone for the game. Because after that, they gave Ole Miss momentum, and they never let go of it, and there was just nothing that the Gamecocks could do to catch up after that. And, Beamer said, it was his fault. I don't mind going for it there. I think it was fourth and 1.
Yeah.
You had a little bit of momentum from the stop. You had the crowd behind you. If you're going to go for it, line up in your offense and run a play.
Yeah, agree.
And then you have a better chance of getting it there because, obviously with Beamer ball, everybody expects that kind of thing on special teams. Everybody expects.
And Ole Miss knew it was coming. I mean, they had their defensive line.
Exactly. They didn't have their punt return team in. They had their defense in.
Yeah.
They were ready for it. And, you know, even when if that play's called, you know, obviously Pat McAfee, you know, special teams player of forever. He talks about it before. He's like, look, we've had calls in to run a fake on fourth. And when I look out and I don't see it, check out of that. Just punt it at that point. You know, as the gunner right there, you should know, okay, I'm about to get this snap. They have more men on their defense line than I got blocking for me. It's probably not going to turn out well. Let's just check out of this. Let's punt it and let's live to fight another day. But instead, we make a terrible call there. And like I said, I think it just went downhill from there.
Yeah, I feel like that decision to go for it on fourth down really set the tone. Whatever momentum you had with your fan base, and really, honestly, our first two series, you know, I didn't mind Ashford being in there, but that's just not a position you can turn the ball over in when you've got an offense capable of making you pay for it in Ole Miss, and you're giving them a great field position. And like I said, and that decision to go for it on fourth down, that's all on the coaching staff. I'm sorry. Like Beamer and I don't know how you pronounce the special teams coordinator's last name's, like Demichelis or something. They should have seen that the way they were lined up, and you can audible. Like, I mean, say, you know, hey, stop, no, punt it. And it was doomed from the get-go because you've got, not to take away from our special teams, but you've got guys who are not offensive linemen blocking, going against defensive linemen. Like, I mean, and I wasn't really paying that close attention to it when it happened, but, you know, looking at the replay, it was doomed from the get-go. And I don't, like you said, I don't mind aggressiveness, but this has kind of been the MO of Beamer's, I guess, coaching philosophy since he's been at Carolina, where I don't mind the aggressiveness, but there's a time and place for it. That was not the place to go for it there.
Well, here, I don't mind going for it, but line up and go for it with a play. Give yourself options. Run an RPO for 1 yard. But again, more than likely, if I was the coach in that situation, I'm punting it.
Because the thing is our offensive line is not capable of really blocking. We'll get into them more here shortly. But again, like, if you're going against Akron, that's fine. But you're going against a top 10 team that's coming off a loss where they just look they didn't look bad, but Kentucky just did a great job of shutting them down. And you gave them all the momentum within the first 5 minutes of the game. And we never recovered from it. And I hate hearing this because it infuriates me. It's what we've heard dating back to the Muschamp era, where they say us as coaches have to be better. We have to prepare. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this, and we look lost. Like, I mean, you could have took some Joe Schmoes off Bluff Road in Columbia and probably did a little bit better of a job than Shane Beamer and his staff yesterday. And it shows how whatever positives we could take from the first 4-5 weeks really just
we took
I don't know. I feel like we have the same conversation. We have the same conversations as Gamecock fans. I feel every 2 to 3 weeks where they show some positivity, they show there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and then we play a game like we did yesterday, where we like you said, we take 2 steps back, and it's just, I mean, because we had a great week of recruiting, we picked up some big time receiver commits. We had 2 reclassify from the 26 class to 2025. One hasn't committed to us yet, but from what the insiders are saying are coming. We had a kid decommit from Florida State that committed to us, Malik Clark. We had another kid reclassify from 26 to 25 that committed to us. And then we got a tight end commit yesterday before the game. And I mean, hats off to Beamer and company for being able to recruit. I don't know what they sell these kids, because if I'm a recruit and I'm at that game watching and I see that, I don't know, like, there's just not a lot to be positive about. I guess it's just it's the same old song and dance for our offense. And I'm not even blaming the defense that much because our offense essentially gifted them 14 points, and Ole Miss only scored one touchdown after that.
Yeah.
When you're going into halftime, I believe it was 24-3, and we gifted them the first. They scored 14 points in the first quarter, 10 points in the second quarter. They only scored 3 points in the second half. So hats off to Clayton White and his defense. Outside a couple plays, there were a couple blown coverages by O'Donnell Fortune, which I think he ended up having. I don't know if they're just saying he was injured to kind of help his confidence, but really, I thought that the defense played great yesterday. There's and outside Dylan Stewart's stupid celebration when he sacked Jackson Dart. It's just, and I know he's a freshman, but man, it's just, we can't get out of our own way. We're the most penalized team in the SEC. We had, I believe, 8 penalties for 80 yards yesterday. Again, it all falls back on coaching. And I know Stewart's a freshman, but again, and you've said this before, in this day and age of college football, these kids are paid. Right. You have to be better, and it just, I don't know, like
they're
I feel like there's a lot
and they're
say.
undisciplined.
Yeah, exactly.
Like said, that all falls on coaching and just being able to control your team. Again, the undisciplined part I could live with if we were always prepared and we played well. Like if you were scoring on teams all the time and you were just dominating, and then you had these stupid taunting penalties, and you actually had a reason to taunt, and you actually had a reason to gloat and get these kind of penalties, I wouldn't be happy with it, but I could live with it. But it's the fact that you're unprepared, you're getting beat, you look terrible, and then you're undisciplined. That makes it worse.
Yeah,
and it makes no sense to be. And I get it. Like for him, he was winning his matchups all day long. If he wasn't getting to the quarterback, he was being held, whether they called it or not. You can look at a lot of plays where they literally tackled him.
Yeah, he essentially got tackled on one play.
Right. So, I mean, for him, he played his game. He was doing what he needed to do. Unfortunately, the scoreboard wasn't reflecting it for you to be taunting. And, in that situation, I think that we could have maybe, if we don't have that penalty, we get the ball back. If we score there, we're kind of in the game still. Instead, you give them – I think they ended up getting points off of that drive when they would have been, punting the ball to us.
Yeah.
So it's just the unpreparedness leading to the undisciplinedness is just – that's infuriating.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear what Beamer has to say, which I think it led to Ole Miss scored a touchdown towards the end of the first half where we sacked them. We sacked Jackson Dart, and they called a holding penalty.
The next play or two was the busted coverage that led to them being on like the 3-yard line.
Well, so they called a holding penalty, so it could have been like 2nd and 17 or 1st and like 20. Well, Beamer accepted the penalty, and 2 plays later, I think on 3rd down, was like you said, the busted coverage with O'Donnell Fortune.
Yep.
And they ended up scoring a touchdown. And I know there's a lot going on in the game, and I don't think Beamer really remembered it too much in his press conference, because he did say he doesn't remember it, but he would have more information on his teleconference call tonight. So I'm curious to see what he has to say about that, because that was sheer stupidity. And it's easy for us to sit here in retrospect and say it, but again, these coaches are getting paid millions of dollars, and that's just not a decision you should have made. You shouldn't. It's one thing like if they got a first down, like they gained positive yards and it'd been like 2nd and 5, but you sacked them and it was a loss of 7 yards. You're talking 3-yard difference between accepting and declining the penalty and giving them an extra play, and it came back to bite us in the butt. And I feel like the coaching decisions again, the defense is the defense. I thought they played great, but the offensive play calling is just atrocious. And I know
think that they should get rid of Loggins now.
I don't think he is. And I know you can't, it doesn't all fall on him. I will say that. Do I think he's the answer? No, but our offensive line can't protect them. We allowed, hold on, let me pull up my sheet.
But here's the thing too, is like the offensive line is struggling, but sometimes play calling leads to offensive line struggling.
And also quarterback play.
Right. If you know, like, listen, we can run outside the tackles. Okay, we can do that. We can throw the quick, short passes. They did really well getting the ball to Joshua Simon on those quick, short passes, out of the backfield.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you can find the things that you're good at to lead to the down the field passing. But here's the thing, like the inside zone run, we are not good at it. Stop running it. Like, every now and then you have to run between the tackles, but right now you're just not there. And he consistently calls inside zone runs, and it's not there. And you're not built to be able to do those plays right now.
Well,
if you're able to run to the outside and get those short, quick passes, that will open up your inside run. But when you're like boneheaded about these plays, and I think that's why he was labeled the worst play caller in the NFL, is because he just would not know how to adjust to say, okay, this isn't working. Let's try something else. It's like he gets the plays that he thinks are going to work for that game. And look, against Kentucky, he had a great game plan, and it worked. Against Akron, great game plan. It worked. So far, against LSU, it was working. But then there's games like, the Old Dominion game. There's games, where
second half LSU.
Second half LSU, where it's just like, this isn't working. Do something else. Yeah. And it's just like he has, I'm not sure if he like takes his playbook and condenses it down each week and says, this is the plays we're going to run this week, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it seems like, because it's like, all right, if it's working, great, it's working. And if it's not, he continues to do it. And it's like, okay, that's why we're in this position, is because we make no adjustments.
Yeah. And like I said, we allowed 6 sacks yesterday. We've allowed 22 all year, and we've allowed 46 tackles for loss. So we just don't do anything consistently good on the offensive line to allow us, we can't block for an inside run. We rarely can block for an outside run consistently. Do we have spurts where we can? Yes. And I don't know if that, because I saw a lot of people saying Elliott needs to be promoted or whatever to the offensive line coach, because Teasley, I don't know, like,
it ain't working.
And then saying Mike Shula should be promoted to the offensive coordinator. And I don't know how Shane Beamer will approach it. I truly don't. Like, I mean, I said this the last year for Muschamp, like, if he's going to bank his career or his head coaching job at South Carolina on Colin Hill and the offense kind of Mike Bobo was calling, I mean, you kind of dig your own grave for that's probably a poor analogy, but
they've made a good case for Shula. I mean, he was offensive coordinator for Cam Newton the year that they went 15-1, went to the Super Bowl, and Cam won an MVP. And he would have the same kind of build in a quarterback that he had with Cam Newton. And, he would be able to run that style of offense. Whereas I think that Loggins just isn't, built, because whenever he was play calling in the NFL, it wasn't that type of quarterback really back then, where it was, the dual threat, big stocky guys that could run and throw. It was more of the drop back kind of passing, and that's what his play calling is kind of built on. I know that he obviously is working in, the RPOs and stuff like that. But if you've just never done that throughout your career, to try to, tailor your offense now to something that you've never done.
Yeah.
And again, it makes no sense when they hired him because of that. Like, that your quarterback, most likely in college and moving forward now, is going to be a dual threat guy. It's going to be very rare that you find a quarterback now coming out of high school or even the transfer portal that is just a drop back NFL, old school NFL type of guy. Mm-hmm. Your offense just ain't working for the type of guys that we have.
And he also, I'm pretty positive he followed around Adam Gase in the NFL. So when he was the offensive coordinator for the Jets, Adam Gase was the head coach. So he was one of those head coaches in the NFL where I think he had a lot of say so in the offense, or he may have called the offense. And Dow was, just named the offensive coordinator, kind of like what you see with like a Lane Kiffin offense or a Gus Malzahn offense, or like a Cliff Kingsbury that's now an offensive coordinator for the Commanders. I think I think you may have mentioned this, where I think Dow Loggins does a great job with preparing his game plan, and like Beamer was saying in his press conference yesterday, where they just threw out stuff they hadn't seen before. And And I just think Loggins just does a poor job of adjusting to what they're giving him. Like, you're going to have your set plays that you call like your script for like the first 2 or 3 series or you first 10 plays, but then you adjust. And normally we do a decent job at halftime of adjusting, but it's at that point yesterday, it was too late. You dug yourself a hole in being down 24-3 at halftime. And you come out in the second half and you drive, it stalls, and you're down 3 possessions. You try to kick a field goal, you miss it, and it would have still kept you down three possessions. And Levi Kell, we'll put his comment on the board. I wonder what Ashford is doing.
That's just what he wanted to say all night while they were losing.
I don't know if this is a troll. Obviously, you probably know Levi more than I do. I don't know if he's a Carolina or a Clemson fan.
Oh, diehard Clemson.
Okay, well, we'll take his comment off then. But I mean, I do think whether he's trolling or not, I think it's a fair question.
Yeah.
And my thing is clearly from what we've seen through the first 5 games, is Lenore's is not that comfortable throwing it deep downfield. Now, I think he can do it, but you could tell the huge difference of Jackson Dart being a 3 or 4 year college football player compared to Lenore Sellers having 4 games underneath his belt at the collegiate level. And I
think he's uncomfortable reading defenses because he's seeing stuff that you don't see it in high school.
I mean his interception that was. I mean, he had luckily it ended up being a holding call, but I mean that was an awful pass where that would have. I think it was an interception, but it was called back due to a holding penalty. Right. But he didn't even see the safety across the middle, atop the receiver. And I know what's going to come with time, and that's the bad thing. Like Beamer's just not really in a position to have and I think Sellers is still going to be a good quarterback.
It all boils down to the offensive coordinator again. Even if
Ashford, in the offensive line,
even if you have Ashford in there, he's still that dual threat, and really even more so for Ashford, he's more of a run-first quarterback.
Yeah.
And again, Loggins, his style of offense is drop back, old school NFL type of scheme. It just doesn't work with the guys that he has.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have that. So even if you put Ashford in there, he just isn't. And he was able to tailor a game plan good enough for Akron because you really didn't have to have you didn't have to have an extensive game plan to be able to do that. So he could take 10, 15 plays that Ashford is good at that kind of tailors to him. But when you got a team that can say, okay, we got those 10 or 15, we know how to adjust to it. Now, what are you going to do from there? He just can't do it.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a coach with one type of scheme having to use players that doesn't fit that type of scheme. You have a person on staff that has called plays for that type of player before and done it extremely well to where they made it to a Super Bowl and that player won MVP.
And even in the Akron game, I think Robbie Ashford, I think it was in his press conference, or when there was the post game press conference where, he gave a ton of credit to Mike Shula, and Caleb. I got Caleb's comment here. It says Sellers needs time on the bench. I believe. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
I really think it boils down to either one of them aren't going to be extremely successful with this type of play calling. That's what it boils down to. I think that Sellers could be more successful. I think that if you put Ashford in there, he would be more successful if you had an offensive coordinator that knew how to use their skill set in an offensive play calling. It's easy to go in and watch film and say, okay, these are the plays we think are going to work this week.
Yeah. You
have to be able to adjust with your player and the type of player he is mid-game. You can't say
he can make passes. He's not your quarterback right now where he can throw it I know you love this, throwing it deep across the middle. Right. He's just not that good. He's not that quarterback right now. But I mean,
he has the talent to be. He just doesn't trust his reading the defense because again, he hasn't seen it, and this is just stuff that's being thrown at him that he hasn't seen, and sometimes it's hard to practice it. Again, offensive line, they're not doing great, but if you have a play caller that knows how to play, call plays for that type of quarter, a lot of it is they don't know when he's going out of the pocket. They don't know, you get these illegal man downfield type of deals because they don't know, all right, do I go block now? Is he running? Is he throwing?
Yeah.
If you have a play caller that's setting you up for that type of stuff, that's working that type of stuff throughout the week, the offensive line would look a lot better than they do. I think it all boils down to play calling. Of course, the players need to be better, but the play calling will help players be better if you know how to tailor a game to their skill set. And also the big thing is if you know how to adjust to their skill set when the defense, obviously matches up to you mid-game.
I think it can go hand in hand where he needs to be better about adjusting his game plan. But again, if you don't have a line that can block consistently and you've got a new quarterback who, like you said, is learning to read the game, or he still doesn't know, when to run the ball, because obviously you want him to stay back there and try to read through his progressions instead of just taking off and running like he did against Old Dominion. So I think again, like I said a few minutes ago, where Beamer and his staff are just kind of in a weird predicament where I do think Lenore Sellers is the right quarterback to be leading this team this year.
Yeah,
now,
I agree.
I think we would be okay with Robbie Ashford, but again, at the same time, you've got essentially a true freshman that is learning the game as he goes, and unfortunately, regardless of what you think of Ole Miss or not, and the way they looked against Kentucky, we have a tough schedule, and we're going up against really good teams week after week normally, outside of 2 or 3 games, where you would love in that scenario to have a Spencer Rattler back, where you don't have somebody that's kind of learning on the fly. And like Caleb said again, honestly, I think it's more than just the right side, but I know they're an issue. But I don't know. I really don't know what else to say about it. It's just, I think it goes hand in hand where Loggins does need to be better, but we also have to be able to block better.
Yeah.
And
you also, if you think about it this way too, you have a freshman quarterback that's, again, like we said, trying to learn the game. And unfortunately for him, he was playing well against LSU. He gets injured. So he could have had, let's just say he has a whole nother half where he continued to play like he was. That's a confidence booster. If he continues to play like that, you win that game, confidence booster. If he's healthy going into Akron and say, okay, we look good. We were a little bit limited in play calling because we wanted to do what we were comfortable with you. But against Akron, we can kind of work some more things out. You're going to feel even more confident going into the bye week. Instead, he's hurt. He doesn't get to play against Akron. So now he's 3.5 weeks almost without playing football. And then the first thing you're going to do is throw him at Ole Miss, who's pissed off because they just got embarrassed by Kentucky. It was unfortunate, but the injury also played into his growth and development over the past, almost a month.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's we're kind of, I don't know.
Again, it's like you said, we're playing a tough schedule. If you looked at the schedule before the year, and you said we're sitting at 3-2 right now, people would have been happy at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Now, since you've seen us play and okay, we do have the potential to have won that LSU game.
Yeah.
And the way that we were looking, we had the potential to beat Ole Miss. Now we're not happy about it. But if you looked at our schedule before the season, before we ever played a snap, and you said, okay, after the 5th game, we're 3-2, people would have been stunned. They would have been happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough because, we go into Alabama next week, who's coming off a tough loss to Vanderbilt.
Yep.
Another thing,
there's a long season to go.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to ask you about, and we were kind of talking about this when we were watching it yesterday, these fake injuries that seem to, and I will say, I'm going to say fake in quotation marks, because if they're hurt, I hope, like Beamer said, I hope they recover and get better. Right. But it seemed to be every time we had a big play where it would be a first down or something, there's always some type of injury for Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin's using it to his advantage, I guess, but it just seemed to be it was always something where the time was called for an Ole Miss player being down, and it wasn't even something where I could understand if it was something that a player was involved in a play, but I mean, they're going back to the line. You're trying to, because I know Beamer likes to try to run a little bit of a more up tempo offense, and the player just falls. It's not like he got
the other thing with
blocked
Lane
really
Kiffin
hard.
though is you've seen him not in our game, but you've seen him in previous games. Tell a player just go down. He'll look at a player. I mean, they literally had him on camera one time where he's telling them go down, and the player just falls, and then they call timeout. And like you said, it's just it's not like it's a player that was involved in. I can't remember how you pronounce the guy's name. He was the big guy, the defensive tackle that scored the 2 rushing touchdowns. I mean, there was one play he was 15 yards behind the ball, and we're trying to run up tempo, and he just takes a knee. Okay, and then we stop the game. He goes out for one play, and then he's back in. Like that's not an injury. Like they should be flagged for that. Like you got guys that are falling down. They're saying that they're injured. They never go to the tent. They never see the medical staff on the sideline. They go to the sideline for 1 or 2 plays, and then they're right back in the game. Like that's not an injury. That's them using a system to their advantage to take a break when teams have momentum going their way. Yeah. And it should be something that, they're investigated on, because you got to look at that and say, like, okay, if they're injured and they're out for 2 or 3 series, they work it out on the sideline and then they're able to come back in, fine. But if you got, there was like 10 or 12 times that they did this where they never had anybody go to the tent. They never had anybody getting evaluated on the sideline. And then the player was right back in within 1 to 2 plays. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's something where they start getting penalized for it, or they have to start. I don't know. Like, I don't know if there's a right way or something that you can say or enforce or implement to change it, because I mean, it is an issue. Like, I mean, it just takes all the wind out of your sails.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's just like a free timeout. I mean, it's usually it's insane that's what it is.
Yep.
And like you said, they go out for a play and then they're right back in like nothing's wrong. And then 4 plays later, he goes down again. And his last name is spelled Pegues, which I think it's like Puegs or Pegasus or something.
Yeah.
I think Furman had a basketball player with a very similar last name who's now at Auburn. So yeah, but it was an issue that it was a thing they were doing against Kentucky. But again, I don't know what you do about it. Like I said, I can understand it if it's something where a player's involved in a play where like they tackle somebody and they come down wrong and it looks like they're truthfully injured. But if somebody just drops, I'm sorry, like you should be penalized for it, or you have to start using timeouts or something. I don't know. Right. It's something, I don't know. Like it is what it is, I guess.
At the end of the day, I don't think it's terrible for the game, but it didn't cost us the game. I mean, we cost ourselves that.
No,
game.
Yeah, and Beamer even said that. He's like, listen, we got our own problems, but he was like, it's crazy to see, where it seemed like every time they had a little bit of momentum going, they always had some type of injury.
Right.
And we'll kind of close off the Carolina game here shortly.
While you switch that, I'm going to grab my computer charger.
Okay. I'll read off some stats for us. South Carolina had 313 yards of total offense, 162 yards passing, 151 yards rushing. Sellers went 20 of 32 for 162 yards, 1 interception. I'm going to bring up Levi's message or his comment here. Levi, man, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a couple games I feel okay about, but honestly, I think I feel more concerned about the Vanderbilt game than really any game on the schedule, because, we go to Alabama next week. I mean, it's Alabama. Then we go to Oklahoma. Then we have a bye week. And then it's, Texas A&M's looking a lot better, or maybe Missouri was just overrated. I don't know. So, but I think Texas has Georgia coming up soon. So that should be a really good game. But Stephen, I'll ask you this before we move on. And I think you may have mentioned this, but do you think we should make a change at the offensive coordinator position?
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you have a guy that's capable of doing it, has done it with the type of player that you have. and has been successful with that.
Yeah.
You just haven't. Even when Rattler was there, a lot of what our offense, when it looked good, it was a lot of just him, making plays out of nothing. And that's just having an experienced quarterback who is extremely talented on top of that. But yeah, I would make a change if I'm Beamer. But here's the thing: is what we've seen with Beamer, he doesn't, he won't. He's just kind of really boneheaded about these things.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, if you want to attach yourself, to this and your ship sinks,
Yeah.
it's on you, man.
Yeah. And again, I do think he's the right guy for this job. It's he clearly cares about the university. The recruiting is really, really good. He's a great recruiter. But again, there's a huge difference than being a position coach and a recruiting coordinator compared to being a head coach, where you're like you said, you're the CEO of the team.
Yeah.
Everything reflects you, regardless if something happens, it all falls back on you. That's why you get paid over $3 million a year to be the head coach, and it's on you to put your players in the best position possible. It's on you to put your team in the best position possible.
Yep.
And if you truly think Dowell Loggins is your saving grace,
it's on you.
More power to you, I guess. But
here's the thing: is like you look at right up the road, Dabo Swinney. He was never a play caller. He was just a wide receivers coach whenever he got the position. He's really good at recruiting. He's really good at managing the team and being a CEO. But the best thing that he's good at is putting the right people in the right spots to make his team successful.
Yeah.
And when it's not, he's very good at making the decision to move on. And you got to be willing to do that.
Another thing is we're going to have a new athletic director. They're going to be hired after the end of the season. But they who knows what they may do.
Director's going to want to make change. I mean, he's going to want things to either succeed
if it's a guy,
the person, them,
whoever's hired,
male or female, they're going to want to make sure the program's successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that Ray Tanner's been very passive with his coaches when it comes to allowing them to just kind of do what they want to do. And then when it's not successful, not making really much of a change. But more than likely, you're going to hire someone whose career has kind of been built to be an athletic director, where Ray Tanner was kind of just ushered into this position just because a lot of what he did for the university. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have somebody to come in more than likely who's going to be, this is what they've always wanted to do, is be an athletic director. They're more than likely going to be a little bit younger, I would think.
The president's he wants somebody that's been a previous athletic director.
So you're going to have somebody with experience in this position. Mm-hmm. You're going to have someone who's obviously going to want to make a name that, hey, we're not going to take, subpar around here on success. No success isn't going to be tolerated. So if you want to hang your whole career at South Carolina on Dowell Loggins, you better make sure that he's on top of his game the rest of the year. But if it was me, I would make a change now. I would change the offensive line coach. I would change the offensive coordinator, or even if you say, listen, we're not, we don't want to get rid of Loggins, but we are going to make a greater effort to have Shula very much so involved in the game planning and also the play calling. We're gonna make it kind of like a 50-50. Loggins is still going to be our OC, but Shula is definitely going to be a lot more involved.
I mean, but we have tons of experience on our coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you got Sean Elliott, who was a head coach at Georgia State. I mean, this is not his first stint at South Carolina, but this is his second stint at South Carolina. He's got tons of experience. The running backs coach, the wide receivers coach was a head coach. So I don't know if it's just play calling by committee, or if it's Loggins just has that arrogance where he thinks his game plan's better than everybody else's, and that's what he's going to stay with. But again, I think there should be a change, whether if it's an official title change or if it's like, listen, these guys are going to, and it may be happening. Who knows? I don't think Beamer's one of those coaches where he's going to throw anybody under the bus, anything like that. When I respect that to a degree, But man, if there's no changes, I don't see how you and I know you can't just keep firing head coaches and everything because you've got buyouts and that you have to think about. But man, it just seems to me like we said at the top of the show, we have this conversation every 2 to 3 weeks about the same things.
Yeah.
And it seems it changes, but then it doesn't. It's like, somebody staying with a significant other that consistently cheats on them and they say, hey, I promise I'll be better. And it's good for a week or two. Well, then they cheat again. And it's like, well, if that's what you're going to bank your career on, your head coaching career, more power to you.
Those guys are probably involved in the game plan. But the thing is, like, all of that kind of goes out the window mid-game because it is then on him to call the plays. So he kind of, I think that offensive coordinators, I think all of them it's really hard to have an input mid-game. You may be able to say, hey, I think this will be open. Let's run this. But it's not like at practice where you can take a step back and say, what if we did this here? You don't really get to do that mid-game. So you got to trust that your coordinator is able to adjust on the fly, and Loggins just can't. I don't think he's ever been able to.
It did seem Beamer was more animated on the sidelines on his headset than what I've ever seen. And I don't know. We'll see. So, but again, I think this was a game where South Carolina definitely could have won. I don't think Ole Miss did anything special. You had the return of Juice Wells, which I know a lot of the players were fired up for. And honestly, again, I think the defense did a great job stopping Juice or the Ole Miss offense in general. Juice had 3 catches for 97 yards, but one of those receptions was a 60-yard catch that he ended up fumbling the ball out of the end zone. So, South Carolina definitely had their opportunities. Ole Miss had some opportunities they gave away. But again, a lot of stuff to work on and clean up for the Gamecocks because it doesn't get easier. We go into Alabama next week, then we go into Oklahoma. But with that, being said, let's jump right into the Clemson at Florida State game. I'll be honest with you. I didn't watch a lot of this game. I was watching more of the Arkansas-Tennessee game. But when the game first started, there were a lot of empty seats. I was like, my God, they've already given up on Florida State. But apparently their stadium's under construction. So I guess that's why they had a lot of
that and probably people have given up on Florida State. They're 1-4.
And this was not the reunion DJ Uyunglele wanted. He did not play. He had surgery on his throwing hand this week. And I think the quarterback's name was something Glenn. Which honestly, the score doesn't really reflect it, but it was a decent game, I believe. Clemson only had 2 touchdowns. Their kicker went 5 of 7 on field goals, so they had 15 points off of field goals. So, but again, you're going on the road. Florida State's not an easy place to play, regardless if where they're at in their season. But Clemson just continues to roll, and the way Miami's looked the past 2 weeks, having to come back against Virginia Tech and Cal, this is really Clemson's conference to lose, and they did what they needed to do yesterday, regardless of what the stat line looks like, what the score looks like. They did what they had to do to win.
Yeah, and they'll be back in the top 10 this week.
Yeah, and let's see who
they got helped by a lot of teams. And like I said, I know we'll get into that in a minute, but they've looked better since that first game. Cade's looked a lot more consistent since game
their schedules
1.
Definitely help with that. I will say that. You can't control who you play because that's predetermined at the beginning, before the season even starts. But they're doing a great job in like you said, rebounding regardless of who they play, because they play at Wake Forest next Saturday. So it's not like
it's not getting any harder.
No, and they got Wake Forest, Virginia bye week. Then they got Louisville, which Louisville lost to SMU yesterday, so they're probably going to be out of the top 25. So Clemson doesn't play another top 25 team the rest of the season. So there's really no excuse for the Clemson Tigers not to win out. And you never know with South Carolina, but excluding the South Carolina game, this is.
They should win the ACC.
Yes, and Levi, I guess he's a Clemson fan, like you said. So it says played really bad, sloppy game, but take a sloppy, easy game over what we've had the past 3 years. Yeah, like you said, a win's a win at the end of the day. Nobody's going to talk about, at least on the outside, of what that win looked like. Excuse me. So, but again, Clemson doing what they got to do to win, and like I said, they're very beneficial from a pretty easy schedule. So, like I said, there's no reason they should not be in that ACC title game and hunting for a college football playoff berth.
I think this game too, when you looked at it from the beginning of the year, again, before you ever take a snap, this was probably a game that everybody pinpointed and said, hey, this is going to be a key game for Clemson, but obviously Florida State. And we've talked about it. I've never seen a drop-off like, a team that claimed that they should be in the national championship or the playoffs last year too. They've only won one game through the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season.
And barely won that game.
Right. I've never seen a drop-off like this. But, yeah, I think that before the season, this is one that Clemson would have pinpointed and said, hey, we need to make sure that we win this game. That'll kind of catapult us. Obviously, Florida State isn't, what they thought they were going to be coming in. So this is just, like you said, one of those games where you can have a sloppy game, still win. At the end of the day, sloppy or clean, as long as you win, you'll take it, especially on the road.
Yeah, and you mentioned this about Florida State with their team last year. That's just when you live and die by the transfer portal. That's just what's going to happen. It's just, it's not something that's going to be, successful every year, and it's not something you can sustain as a program, in my opinion. You've got a bunch of kids in there who maybe don't give 2 rips about your football program. They're just there because you gave them a couple $1 million to go, and they don't really care at the end of the day if they win or lose. And I think that's what Florida State's learning.
You think they're learning that Norvell?
Have you seen that buyout?
But here's the thing: is Florida State's one of those schools that's got the money.
I understand that, but I don't feel there's many teams that can pay that and then
let's say they don't win the game the rest of the year.
I'm sure they will, but he's got like a $60-70 million buyout. There's only really a couple of teams that can do that.
You were 13-1 last year, and now you might be 1-11 this year.
Yeah,
and here's the thing: is like it's even though they do the transfer portal, like they've got the money. It ain't like that they live and die by the transfer portal and they didn't get the guy. Like they spent the money and went and got guys. It just ain't working out. And that comes on coaching, because if you can't get the guys in and make them buy into your system and then work in your system.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Let me see. I'm pretty sure he's owed like $72 million. Let me check real quick.
But here's the thing: is like, if you as donors, would you put up with that to say, listen, the way your system works, you need my money and you can't get it done. I'd rather just go ahead and pay the $72 million buyout, get a new coach in here that is going to be able to, get us back on the winning track.
But there's a huge difference in, paying a player $1 million to come instead of paying. And I know he's not paid all that money at once, but hold on.
Yeah, most of the time, if he wants to get another job, that buyout is cut.
His buyout is $63 million.
And the only way that he gets that, if let's say they fire him, the only way he gets that full 63 is if he doesn't coach for the length of that.
Well, I think there's conditions, and I guess it's different because
if he goes and makes a job somewhere else, they got to cut that buyout significantly.
Yeah, they don't have to pay them full amount, because I'm pretty sure Mike Norvell, Matt Rule was still getting some of his buyout from the Panthers when he took the Nebraska job.
Yeah,
so
and that's a little bit different too, because you're going NFL to college. Yeah. But most of the time, if they're going college to college, like there's a significant cut in that buyout.
Yeah.
Or he could just sit for a few years and collect $63 million.
I'd sit for a couple of years.
You can go and take an unpaid analyst job somewhere, and then just kind of work your way back into coaching as you in that contract.
And the issue is, and that's kind of the bad side or downside to head football coaches, because you have one good season and that agent just leverages that administration said, all right, well, if you're not going to give us this, then we'll leave.
Right.
And that's the one downside where really Mike Norvell didn't have a great tenure at Florida State, but last year he just kind of struck lightning in a bottle with all the, pieces that they had via the transfer portal or their recruiting classes. But
that's what I'm saying. If you look at his tenure at Florida State as a whole,
it's not good.
They only had one good year, and then immediately after that, they had the biggest fall off in college football.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think, I'm sure Clemson fans will agree. I don't understand wanting to get DJ Uyunglele as your quarterback. And I even said this to somebody at the Dillon JV football game on Thursday. You look at what Dabo and company did at Clemson when they had DJ as their quarterback, looks more and more impressive every week he played at Florida State.
Yeah.
And he benefited being at Oregon State last year where, there's not a lot of media attention out there. You're kind of in a different time zone, maybe. I'm not positive. So I'm curious to see what Florida State does because it just doesn't look good. That's about all I got for the Clemson Florida State game. I wish I was still kind of in a sour mood after our game. But again, I watched I didn't watch it like fully like I do our games, but I had the Tennessee Arkansas game on. So, and that'll put us in, our last segment before we get out of here. We'll kind of recap some national games. Alabama coming off a huge win over the Georgia Bulldogs in Bryant-Denny last weekend. They travel to Vanderbilt, which I don't even know the name of their stadium, and lose.
Under construction.
They lost to Vanderbilt. I'm nervous about our game against Vanderbilt now. And that was even before they beat Alabama.
Yeah, because Vanderbilt, honestly, they've looked a lot better than what you normally see out of a Vanderbilt team. And then you see them obviously pull off, the biggest upset, this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago on Pat McAfee's show, he had Nick Saban on for his segment. And he said that every place in the SEC is hard to play except for Vanderbilt.
Well, it's still not a tough place to play. There are more Alabama fans there than there was Vanderbilt.
Yeah, it's just kind of ironic he says that. And then immediately when his previous team goes into Vanderbilt, they lose right after, defeating Georgia and becoming the number one team in the country.
Yep.
But yesterday was just one of those days where it wasn't going right for a lot of the big teams.
Yeah, yesterday was drunk. And I feel like Alabama fans their chickens have come home to roost with the changing of the court or of the coaches. I still think Kalen DeBoer is a great head coach. I'd love to have him at South Carolina.
Yeah.
But it's gonna.
Well, that was only his fourth loss as a Power 5 coach. I think he was going into the Georgia game. He was 30-3 as a Power 5 head coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean. And then he won that game. Unfortunately for him, they come in and I'm not sure if they just had a hangover from just the way that
couldn't stop them
Georgia
on
game.
offense.
Yeah, there was just
Alabama couldn't stop Vanderbilt on offense at all.
And you just kept thinking like, okay, obviously Vanderbilt's jumped out, kind of caught them off guard, but Alabama's definitely going to be able to score and get back in. And they were scoring. They just couldn't stop Vanderbilt from scoring.
Yeah. And the thing is, I went to our game against Vanderbilt the last time we played there. And, for people who are watching this that don't know where Vanderbilt is, it's in Nashville. And that university is about maybe 2 to 3 miles away from Broadway Street, which is the country capital of the world where there's bar after bar.
Yeah.
And people don't go to Nashville to see Vanderbilt.
Most people in Nashville don't even know that Vanderbilt's there.
I kid you not, dude. And I think I told you this at the time. I went with some family members of mine, and we took an Uber from our hotel to the football game, we went to a bar to tailgate, and he was like, "What brings y'all into town?" Like, the football game. He's like, "The football game." You were like, "Yeah, South Carolina plays Vanderbilt." He was like, "Oh, okay." And then even after the game, we got picked up from not even a mile from the football stadium at like a hotel. And he's like, "Where y'all coming from?" The football game. And that everybody's talking about, the students tore down the goalpost and
carried it 3 miles to the Cumberland River.
Yep, and that'll be probably the last game they go to. Like I said, that's not a stadium that is a home field advantage. Like I said, there were probably more Alabama fans than there were Vanderbilt fans, and the reason why Vanderbilt fans were there is because Alabama was coming into town. Right. It's like when you in college basketball where like a Duke or a UNC or a Kentucky comes to town.
Yep.
The fans are going to show up for those away games, and yeah, like when I was at the Vanderbilt game, there were definitely more Carolina fans than there were Vanderbilt fans. But don't take anything away from Vanderbilt. Granted, Vanderbilt did lose to Georgia State this year.
Yeah.
But they look good. That offense is scary with that quarterback. So that game makes me more nervous now when we travel to Vanderbilt. Not because of the atmosphere, but just Vanderbilt's a good football team this year. They're not just,
and especially if they take
Vanderbilt.
If they take the momentum out off of this win, I'm not sure who they play next, but obviously their schedule isn't going to get any easier either. But if they can string together a couple more big wins, because there is a lot of teams that you look at that you thought were going to. I'm not sure. Have they already played Missouri?
Who?
They've already played Missouri, Vanderbilt, correct?
Yeah, they only lost by 3 points.
Right, they should have beat Missouri. So I mean, there's a lot of games that Vanderbilt should have won.
So they play at Kentucky next weekend. Then they got Ball State at home. Then they host Texas, and then they've got at Auburn, at then they've got South Carolina on November the 9th, and they have a bye week. Then they go to LSU, and then their last game of the season is against Tennessee.
Yeah.
So they don't have an easy schedule remaining either in terms of SEC play.
Again, though, if they can take confidence out of this game, go and beat Kentucky, beat Ball State.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes all you need is just to get the ball rolling, and it doesn't matter what's happened previously. If you can build some confidence and be playing, on a high, sometimes that helps you. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, and we'll continue with the SEC. Texas A&M at home against Missouri beats Missouri 41-10. In my opinion, I wasn't surprised that Texas A&M won because it's playing at home, and especially at an environment that is a true home field advantage, like it is at Kyle Field.
Yep.
I wasn't surprised that A&M won, but it's just the way they won. Like Missouri, they looked bad.
Yeah, there was a lot of people picking A&M in this game, and again, like you said, it's not surprising to me that A&M won, but they just demolished them.
And Missouri was coming off a bye week like South Carolina was, and they laid a stinker. And honestly,
I've always told you that I hate bye weeks because it seems like people always come out like this off of bye weeks. We've seen it in baseball, always with the Braves. If they ever had a bye in the playoffs, they come out flat. You've seen it with the Phillies last night. They're not gonna say this because they gave the Braves such a devil last year about
oh no, they did. They were blaming the
layoff,
the shadow, which I mean it was a pretty intense shadow, but
yeah, buys are always tough though, and I think it comes down to if your coaching staff is extremely good to keep your team focused on those bye weeks, because again, you're getting out of that routine, and athletes are so routine based. People that, when you get them out of their routine, and especially if they got to go in and play a very tough opponent. He's a Mets fan. He's a Mets fan. So he's riding a high today.
Levi,
he's riding a high.
Where are you getting, you're almost like Steven with all these random teams. Like Steven's a Cowboys fan.
He's riding a high today. And
he's
a Cowboys
Celtics fan. Levi, please put in the comments how you became. I'm not just saying this to clown you. I'm curious on how you became a Mets fan. So please put it in the chat because I'm gonna post it up here. If it's a legit reason, it's a legit reason. But I don't understand how. If you were a Yankees fan, that would make sense. Yeah, but a Mets fan, come on. But yeah, the bye.
But Missouri hasn't looked good all year
because I feel like bye weeks just allow maybe you tinker too much. I don't know. But outside Missouri's first 2 games against Murray State and Buffalo, they haven't really looked that good.
That's true.
They escaped against Boston College. They barely escaped against Vanderbilt, and you see what happened with A&M. So it's, but he says everyone was either a Braves or a Yankees fan when I was a kid, and I like to fuss.
He does. That's all he does is fuss.
Okay, I guess I'll accept that. Like it's, yeah. I do think the Mets the Dodgers did win last night, so, but I mean it is a real thing coming out of, especially we're kind of shifting real quick, but it's something the Braves suffered with the past 2 playoff seasons where you had that first round bye, and baseball is all about consistency and staying hot. And I think football is a lot different than baseball.
Well, you see with the Yankees,
I liken baseball to golf, like where it's very rare where you play the Masters and win, and then you don't play again until the next major, like a month later, and expect to win. So, but
it's all routine. It's all staying in what your routine is.
Yeah,
and that's why you see a lot of these coming out of these bye weeks and not playing well.
Yeah, and then Michigan goes into Washington and loses 27-17. I think this is kind of the way Michigan's season's going, where everything worked out last year, where they did have the best team in football. They did lose a lot, but you lose your head coach. There's even though you promoted from within, there's no guaranteed success. Michigan doesn't really have much of an offense, especially passing the ball. So I didn't really watch too much of this one, but again, this was another top upset, I guess you could say, because Michigan was ranked ahead of Washington. We mentioned this at the top of the show. Miami came back down 35, I believe it was 35-10 to win against Cal on the road. So that's very impressive. And then Minnesota beating USC 24-17. I think I saw that writing on the wall. USC is not a team that can win in the Big Ten. That's just the type of offense that they run. That's not Big Ten football. And I'm curious because I believe next weekend, who's Oregon play? I want to say Ohio State.
USC just isn't that good.
No, they're not. So we got some huge matchups next weekend. You got Texas, Oklahoma, Penn State, USC, Ohio State, Oregon play next Saturday. So, and it's at Oregon. So I feel like Ohio State's not really played that prototypical Big Ten.
Yeah.
Where Big Ten's just like ground and pound you. So, but USC is just not a team I think that can survive in the Big Ten with Lincoln Riley. It's just, I think you're finding out more and more he's not really a great head coach. He's a great offensive coach, but he kind of inherited a Cadillac when Stoops left Oklahoma, and when he found out, you could probably argue this, but when it was, found out Oklahoma was going to the SEC, he bolted. He left because he probably knew he wouldn't be successful there. And now he's in the Big Ten, and he's probably not going to be that successful there. So, and honestly, in the way college football is going, where the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be, the big time conferences where they're vying to try to get at least 4 spots in the college football playoff. And the more these conferences add, the teams who are kind of towards the middle of the pack or towards the bottom of the pack, like South Carolina is in the SEC, it's not going to get any better. So be very curious to see what happens with that. So, but that does it for today's episode.
Whoa!
What?
Tennessee.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I thought
you watched that game.
I'm sorry. I thought we discussed it. I'm sorry.
No. So that was the other big one, because that one, after
I don't even have it on the sheet. That's my fault. I don't know what happened with that. Yeah,
Arkansas, but that one kind of keeps the SEC open right now. I think because you got Georgia that lost, Alabama now lost, Tennessee lost, so you kind of got Texas is sitting there.
Yeah.
if they lose, it's just kind of even playing field at the top. I mean, because here's the thing: you're looking at teams, like Ole Miss, like LSU, even teams like South Carolina. They may have 2 SEC losses, but you're looking at the top, and they all got one loss outside of Texas. Another loss here or there. Like I said, in the SEC, you're playing tough teams week in and week out.
Yeah.
And also, you just never know what's going to happen if you're not on your A game every single week.
Yeah. I was very surprised.
SEC's kind of wide open.
I was very surprised by the Tennessee-Arkansas game last night. And I do love a good troll job. And Vanderbilt did this with Alabama last night, where they played that clip where Nick Saban said it on game day about Vanderbilt's not a tough place to play. Well, Arkansas started playing Rocky Top, and that is a catchy song. So, but I love a good troll job. Another thing I did see, and I feel like we have talked about this, where when the fans storm the field or rush on the field or rush on the court, I'm just waiting for something very bad to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's no really recourse for the fans to, they may get arrested, but at the end of the day, they get arrested. But what's to stop a fan from just like getting straight in the face of a player of the opposing team and they just knock them out?
Yeah.
It's
going to happen.
I'm all for it happening, but I don't know. Like, it's something bad's about to happen.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen.
Thing. If you look at the very end of the Alabama game when Vanderbilt was taking the knee, you can see the Alabama player. I mean, he's furious where he's throwing, I believe it's probably his mouthpiece or something like that.
One of them
they rush that field, and you got some drunk college kid that gets in a player's face who's clearly emotional and already upset, and you get some kid that's, inebriated, whatever, that gets in his face, and you just catch him at a bad moment. Something bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
We've talked about rushing the field, rushing the courts numerous times, and I just don't. I like it, but something bad is going to happen.
Yep.
There's really no way to control what happens when it.
Nope.
When it takes place.
In the Tennessee Arkansas game, a Tennessee player did shove an Arkansas fan, and based off the video I saw, I mean, you can't really tell if he said anything to him, but it was just like it was almost like he was going in between him, like the kid was going in between 2 Tennessee players, and the Tennessee player just shoved the kid, and then the kid got pushed into a girl. And the girl fell on her back. I don't know if she hit her head or something.
It's just chaos on that field too.
Yeah,
and all that's going on.
And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but
it's dangerous.
Yeah, it can lead to something bad happening. I feel where it's especially. I don't think it's grown adults going to these football players. It's their
kids.
Peers in college. Who are doing it that think they could just do whatever, and then they get appalled when a player reacts.
Right.
It's like in the NBA where these fans sit courtside and just berate somebody, and then they aren't all like surprised when they get kicked out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I think that should be addressed, but how you address it, I don't know. So it's. Yep. But again, another wild weekend in college football. I know they deemed this weekend apple picking weekend, just based off the teams or the matchups we had. So it was a good week college football.
It was, and it kind of, like I said, not only did it level the playing field in the SEC, but just kind of across the board.
Yeah.
There's going to be a big shakeup in the top 10, I think.
The SEC is wide open. Yeah, the number 1 team lose. I'm pretty sure Tennessee was number 4.
Yep.
So
Missouri was number 9.
Yeah. So
that's 3 in the top 10 right there that lost.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. We got MLB baseball playoffs happening right now. Unfortunately, the Braves season did come to an end this past week, which I'm kind of glad it did. It just, for however this season went, it was very impressive for the Braves to even make the playoffs.
Yeah, I was furious, but when you sit back and you just say, okay, everything that the Braves dealt with this year to even be in a position to be in the playoffs, I mean, it's just hats off to. I mean, I don't give Snicker a lot of credit because I think he makes a lot of dumb decisions sometimes. But for him to keep the team motivated and, being able to deal with all that they dealt with and end up in the playoffs, hats off to them. Hopefully they get back right for next year.
I mean, yeah, you lose Ronald Acuna to another ACL tear. You lose Austin Riley. You lose Ozzie Albies for a while. You lost Michael Harris for a while.
Yep.
You lost Sean Murphy for a long period of time. And this is one thing that I will bring up to you since we kind of brought up the MLB playoffs. I saw a video. Somebody was like interviewing Chipper Jones, and he mentioned how frustrating it was being on the staff for the Braves, just the way they approach hitting now, where it's just the complete opposite of what it used to be. And I think a lot of people wanted some type of change to the coaching staff, and I don't believe there's going to be any changes.
Yeah.
But I do think AA's got a lot of. This is an important offseason for him. Are we going to make a change at the shortstop position?
Right.
Are we going to re-sign Max Fried? We struck lightning in the bottle with Chris Sale having, really up until the last, week of the season or the last game. He stayed healthy. He's going to win the Cy Young. He won the Triple Crown for a pitcher, which, is very rare. ERA, strikeouts, and wins. So he's going to win the Cy Young Award, his first Cy Young Award of his career. Charlie Morton's probably done. We start lightning in a bottle with Reynaldo Lopez, who was traditionally a reliever in previous seasons. Spencer Strider, coming off a second Tommy John surgery. How, and I know that surgery is just more common as the years go along.
I think he didn't actually end up having TJ. He had it was like some brace, like an internal brace that they were able to put on. So the recovery isn't as long, and I think that it's not as damaging. But still, he's still had a Tommy John surgery before. Yeah.
And, so clearly, there's question marks around that. So it's, they have to go out and get some. You can't just keep trying to find lightning in the bottle when you traded for Gio Urshela and Whit Merrifield and Laureano in right field. Like, I don't know. Like, it's, I don't think Ronald's going to be fully healthy when we start the season, so he might be DHing. And so there's a lot of uncertainties around the Braves and what they're going to do, especially with the pitch staff, because I don't think that Max Fried's going to be back. And I don't think, honestly, and I know that's just the market, I don't think he deserves the amount of money he's probably going to get. And the Braves aren't going to give it to him, especially to a pitcher.
The analytics or whatever they used today, and they said that his projected salary would be like a 6-year, like $22 million a year, which that's not bad. Like, if you can get him for that, that's not bad. Yeah. But I think just the name, some of his past seasons, he'll end up getting more than 22. But I'm like you. Sometimes you just don't need to overpay guys that are going to start,
especially a pitcher,
every 5 days.
Yeah, and that was kind of thing with Theo Epstein with the Cubs, where he's not going to spend that money. But you kind of live and die by it. Where you do need a good pitching staff, and the Braves, for all intents and purposes, had a good pitching staff this year. So it's very curious. I think game 2 for both NLDS games are tonight. So I'm curious to see what happens with the Phillies. I mean, it's a real thing coming off that bye week. The Dodgers got lucky last night, and another thing for the Padres, one of the guy who started game 2 against the Braves in the divisional series or the wild card series is done for the year. He's going to have Tommy John surgery. Right. So, the Padres have a already shortened pitching staff. So it's be curious to see. We'll be back for our high school recap episode Tuesday night at 7 p.m. We'll have our live episode recap next Sunday. Carolina playing
Alabama.
At Alabama. I don't know why I had Oklahoma on my mind. And Clemson travels to Wake Forest. Both games, I believe, are 12 p.m. kickoffs. So, when we lose, at least the whole day is not ruined.
Exactly.
Steven, anything else before we get out of here?
That's all I got.
All right, Levi, Caleb, if y'all are still watching, thank y'all for joining us. To everybody who watched, thank you for joining us. Please like and share and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll put that up right before, we head out of here. So, like I said, we'll be back on Tuesday. Our high school recap episode will be live at 7 p.m. A lot to get into in that episode tomorrow, Steven.
Yep.
A lot of teams lost this week. And like I said, we'll be back next week. Y'all have a good rest of your weekend.